Welcome. I am Nancy Bavor, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's Textile Talk with Ryan Carrington. You're in for a real treat. I am the director of the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, and it just gives me great pleasure to be at these textile talks when we are presenting. Ryan Carrington is also one of our current exhibiting artists. And as you all know, Textile Talk is a weekly virtual lecture series presented by 6 different fiber organizations each Wednesday. Those are Studio Art Quilt Associates, the International Quilt Museum, San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, Surface Design Association, the Modern Quilt Guild, and the Quilt Alliance. Today's presentation and Q&A session will last about an hour, and so that we can continue to offer these for free, I hope you'll consider making a donation or becoming a member of our museum. And we'll put a link in the chat shortly, or you can visit the San Jose Museum's website. During today's presentation, please use the Q&A button for your questions, the chat box for greeting others, and the post-event survey for commentary and constructive feedback. And if you prefer not to see notifications from the chat, you can just turn it off and click on the chat bug, or you can click on the chat button and toggle down and see what's coming on. We are also offering a live transcript. If you find it distracting, there is a button on the lower level, usually on the lower level of your screen, that you can turn that off. And as always, we ask you to be respectful and courteous as you engage with speakers, moderators, and other participants. We also want to thank our 2021-2022 Textile Talk sponsors who make it possible for us to offer this series free and make it accessible to audiences worldwide. Our sponsors at the platinum level include Moda Fabrics and Supplies and the Quilting Daily. At the silver level, eQuilter and Aurifil. And at the bronze level, thank you to Artistic Artifacts, Clover, Empty Spools Seminars, Misty Fuse Attached Ink, 9 Patch Fabrics, Quiltmania, Schiffer Publishing, Thai Silks, and The Quilt Show. Thank you very much, all of you sponsors. We really appreciate it. I'd also like to just take this opportunity to share a few upcoming events at the museum. We are open, we're proud to say, happy to say, our galleries have new exhibitions, including the 13th iteration of American Tapestry Biennial, solo shows by former Textile Talk speaker Kira Dominguez Holtgren, and today's speaker Ryan Carrington. We also have on view Stars and Stories, American Art from the Permanent Collection, and beginning August 20, an exhibition with our current artist in residence, Corinne Okada Takara. And we look forward to working with Corinne on her upcoming BioQuilt workshop on August 15th, which will take place next to the museum, outdoors, in the newly built pocket park that contains a dog park and a community demonstration garden. A few days before that, we will hold a virtual lecture with Tommy McClure Scanlon, whose work is currently on display in American Tapestry Biennial 13. And she will discuss the process and inspiration behind her tapestries. And to learn more about these events and to register, please visit our website, sjquiltmuseum.org. And we'll also put our website link in the chat in a moment. And now I am delighted to introduce today's speaker. He's a gifted artist, educator, and I'm happy to say a friend of the museum, Ryan Carrington. We've worked with Ryan in previous group exhibitions as an artist in residence in 2018, and we're thrilled to debut his first solo exhibition at San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles called Contradictions. Ryan has been teaching sculpture, site-specific and professional practice courses at Santa Clara University since 2012. He earned his BFA at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and after undergraduate school, he spent 18 months as an artist in residence at the Anderson Ranch Arts Center in Colorado. He went on to receive his MFA from San Jose State University. He exhibits his work nationally and has produced multiple large-scale public commissions. And in 2014, he received the Silicon Valley Creates Emerging Artist Laureate Award, which for those of you who are in our area, it's a very prestigious competitive award, so congratulations on that. And he was selected for the 2020 Center for Arts Humanities Fellowship at Santa Clara University. Another high five for that one, Ryan. So today, Ryan will be sharing more about his creative practice and his current exhibition, Contradictions, that you see an image of here, on view at the museum through September 12th. And we're so excited to have you here today, Ryan. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for coming. I'm going to go ahead and screen share here. We just heard Nancy do a lot of thinking, and I also have a lot of people to thank as well. So I wanted to start by thanking Amy, Nancy, Sam, Pace, and the entire team at San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles. They've just been so great to work with, and it's been super fun putting together my first solo museum exhibition, and I really thank them for that opportunity. I also want to thank Daniel Garcia for taking some images of the show that I'll be using some of today from Content Magazine, and Sal Pizarro from the San Jose Mercury News for his coverage of the exhibition, and just coverage of all the arts in San Jose. And last but not least, I want to thank the Center for the Arts and Humanities. The fellowship that I received from them helped support both student workers to help me fabricate this work, and also funding to help pay for it. And big thanks to Michelle Burnham and Amy Randall for their work in that, and wrestling up extra funding from the Cole Fund at Santa Clara University. The exhibition is the culmination of that research from that fellowship. So it's very exciting to get that. I want to start by discussing a little bit of my work in a broader context, and then get into the work that's in the exhibition. And so I grew up in a family that values labor, hard work, and creating with one's hands. At the heart of my pieces lies a quiet homage to the modern day craftsman and tradesman. And my work bridges issues of labor, class, work ethic, and economics with my personal and family history. And so I'm from Wisconsin. I don't know if you can tell from my voice, but they told me I sound like I'm from California, which I don't know about that. Anyways, everybody in California tells me I'm from the Midwest. So, and so I've always been around labor and work, and kind of the tedium that goes into those processes, and been fascinated with those tools. And that's kind of the starting point for a lot of my work. I believe deeply in this idea of medium as message, and the idea that, like, the material that something is made out of can affect the way that it's perceived. This piece is a plywood hard hat that I made out of stacked plywood and then carved with an angle grinder. And it's called Closing Bell, and it's this reference to kind of the closing bell of Wall Street, but then the blue collar symbol and material of plywood. And so materiality has always been really important to me. This is through any of the objects that I make, and some of them are like this one is more based on this Objects of Americana. And this is actually titled Larry, after my father, who I think I saw his name pop up in the chat. So that's cool. Hey, Dad. And it's made out of plywood, and then materials directly off the shelf from Home Depot, these plumbing parts, to create this Weber grill, a symbol of the American summer, right? This is a brick oven mitt. It's about 30 inches long. And I kind of like this idea of shifting scales, and then making, things out of varied materials to sort of give points of reference. And so this was made out of brick, and then I carved it so that it looked as though it's quilted in the shape of a giant oven mitt. This piece here is a reference to a piece that's actually in the exhibition. This is called Grandma May, after my Grandma May. And it's a plywood top lattice crust pie with a necktie filling. And so that blue collar and that white collar, kind of both of those things kind of coming together in this unifying symbol of the American pie. And this is about 24 inches across. And so, as an artist who uses the idea of medium as message, I'm kind of always looking at different materials and how those materials can inform the concepts behind the work. For me, I like the challenge of working with a variety of materials. People ask, like, what kind of artist are you? And it's like, well, I don't know. I guess I say I'm a sculptor because that's sort of code word for anything. And so I kind of take that route with my practice. And it's more about kind of, the part that I enjoy is figuring out new materials, and how do I make plywood, how do I carve it in to make it look like it's a true lattice crust, and how do I use screws to make screw drawings, and how can I use materials in ways that enhance the viewer's experience with the work, and maybe gives them a little more space to consider those materials and the materiality of objects around them, and how that can affect the way that they perceive the work, and then also maybe think about the world a little differently. I also do performative pieces. This is from the Berkeley Art Center. I have a Christian Dior suit and Prada shoes, and I dress up as a CEO and do acts of manual labor. Oftentimes, there's a lot of hair combing going on in these things. There's a lot of hair combing, a lot of grooming. I kind of keep my eyes above the crowd and don't smile, which for me is tough. I'm a natural smiler, so it produces some challenges there. But I like this idea of what is work and how do we value work and labor in society. And in this case, I'm using kind of this performative actor or myself as kind of the driving force of that content. And trying to get at it. In 2016, I did a performance as part of the ICA Live series just down the street from the Quilting Museum there. And I did a piece, and in this one, I actually fabricated a little suburbia out of cinder blocks. And I was chained to one of the blocks, and in the end, I kind of worked myself into a larger house form using these things, kind of deconstructed them and reconstructed one, and I was locked in it, and cut myself free and sort of walked off. But it was interesting, and as one kind of reflects on their practice and thinks about this is only 5 years ago, but 5 years is a long time, sort of, but is it? I don't know. The last couple of years have been a little squishy, but regardless, as I was reflecting upon this work, I was thinking, I was struck by the idea that I was really kind of talking about the American dream, through the lens of cinder blocks and suburbia and all the other components that I was working with. But I was talking about that American dream and kind of that shifting of that target. And the American dream for the CEO dressed right there is going to be different than the worker doing that labor. And why is that? And how can we sort of like address that? And how can we let that, impact decisions that we make as a society and how we support each other? And so that was kind of this, it was nice to see that in the work from a while back, in a way that maybe I think a magnifying glass has been put over those types of issues currently. And it was nice to see that I've been dealing with it for a while. In all the performances, I end up with made objects. And so I'm very interested in, creating, these are cast cement road cones with, all the details of the reflective tape in there. And then this is actually the first of this flag series that I make, or that I made. And this is the first one, and it's a flag made out of blue collar materials, like so blue collar pants. Mostly, this was actually all my pants in this one. And then business suits, neckties, and you can see the shirt there. And all the flags are made to the congressional standard, so they're all like, the ratio is the one that's been approved by our government. And I've made 21 of them now, and I really like them as this unifying symbol. I think, for me, it's bringing together these, by using these uniforms of these two sets of workers, I'm kind of bringing together into this unifying symbol those classes of workers, and maybe calling into idea, calling in, maybe just provoking a conversation across that of how we value each other and labor. And I get really into it. I very much enjoy parts of the process and not others. I'm sure many of you can relate. I guess I do embrace tedium, but there's some of the tedious nature of things that gets extended. But I really like to zero in on the fabric itself. So I include, like, that's the lapel of the jacket. This is the right hand pocket of these pants, which is, where the keys have been put. So there's that wear on that material, there's sweat around the collars of the collared shirts. And really kind of zeroing in on the details of these things is what I find most engaging about making them. And it's interesting, what I do when I make these, I organize it in piles. So let's look at this blue one for a second. If I take, there's 3 business suits and three sets of denim. And what I do is I take the denim and I'll cut it up into piles, like, no texture, medium texture, and high texture. And the same with the suits. And then I make those piles, and then, that takes time, and they're sitting there, and then, a couple weeks later, like I, put the kids to bed, and it's 9 p.m. and it's time for me to get my studio practice on. And I pull out all that stuff, and I start to lay out the fabric. And for me, that's the most fun part of making these. It's this compositional experience where, I take the lapel and put it over here, and then I put this like stripy one behind it. And then, I don't want it to overlap, so I kind of carry the stripes onto this row. And it's this organizing and moving and kind of this fluid moment that really, honestly, I think it really lasts like just a few hours. It's like that one day, that one night, and then the rest is, back on the just sort of repetitive nature of making that we're also familiar with. But it's that compositional moment is really exciting for me, and learning how to sew, and then how to actually harness, how to use the tools to make sure that I'm getting the details that I want in each stripe, is really fun. And so that's a big part of the process for me. And I think that's my favorite moment of making these things, other than hanging them. It's always great when they're done. When the pandemic hit, I realized that, I felt pretty helpless. There wasn't a whole lot that I could do. I teach at Santa Clara University, and we were doing Zoom school, which took a ton of time, but to transition to. But as far as just the rest of life, I like many people, was stuck at home. I didn't have a whole lot going on, and I also felt pretty helpless that I wasn't like able to kind of contribute. And so I thought about it, and I thought, the way that I can contribute is to make some flags using healthcare uniforms, of healthcare workers. And so, I kind of wanted to honor their hard work and their fight on the front lines the best way that I could. And as an artist, it was to make an art piece, doing just that. And so these are part of that series. This is actually flag number 19, which is, like, to me, like, crazy ironic that, I've been making this series for years, and then flag number 19 happened during COVID-19. I don't know. But maybe I should stop making them. Jeez. And so this is a piece where, it's got like the details of the doctor. This is a family friend from Madison, actually. And another doctor there, and, kind of this pocket here, you can see there's like little dots, and that's because this doctor was right-handed, and they always put the pen in that pocket. And it's kind of like recapturing and looking at that history of that fabric and that history of the uniform, that the stories that fabric can tell and that textiles can tell, and really trying to highlight that in this larger sort of format. I guess you can see it a bit up there. Was pretty exciting. And it was, yeah, just kind of got the not for sale logo there and the Kaiser logo. And this piece was actually part of the Holding the Moment exhibition at SJC during the middle of the pandemic, and I was quite honored to be able to be a part of that. So thanks for that. In thinking about materiality and what different materials can conceptually bring to the table, I was having a conversation with Katarina Burnau and from Art Ventures Gallery in Menlo Park. And she was talking about how when she got married, that was her naturalization of, and that was when she got her citizenship. And so we were talking about it, and she mentioned that she had this wedding dress, and she commissioned me to create this piece here, which is her wedding dress. And I really like this idea of, like, the symbolism of the dress, and then what it meant towards getting that naturalization and getting that American citizenship. And those of you that have worked with these types of materials, I commend you. This was new for me. I have a tiny little sewing machine, and I just had to kind of angry sew my way through it. But I learned a lot, and it was really fun. And this is it was great. So this is a piece from the exhibition. This is called StarSpangled Banner, and it's modeled after the original StarSpangled Banner that's in Washington, D.C. And we took a family trip there a few years back. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's this beautiful museum in the Smithsonian Hall there where all the museums are. And you walk down the side of it on a ramp. And as you walk down this ramp, behind you, kind of elevated at an angle, is that original Star-Spangled Banner. And when you turn the corner and see it, it was such an impactful moment to see that symbol of America and I guess just history and everything that's wrapped up in it. And so I look back at that and it just, things ping around, right? Like you see something, and then it wasn't until a couple of years later maybe that I actually ended up making this piece. But I mean, for me, that's often the case in my practice. I'll have a thought about creating an artwork, and I'll kind of mull it over and chew on it, and maybe like talk about it with my wife or a friend or something, and then kind of put it away, and let it just sort of like simmer. And once it's, I mean, maybe it's more like braising because it takes a while, but once it's nice and done, and I've got it all worked out in my head, that's when I can actually make the thing. And I think oftentimes that time is a year or two. But this piece is an example of that. This is made out of white collared shirts and painter's pants. I was at a barbecue at my neighbor's house, and he mentioned that his father was a painter, and I went over to him and started talking to him. And my Spanish is not good, and his English was very good, and so he was talking to me in English, and then I said to him, hey, can I have your pants? And it was great because, like, it was funny, and it kind of worked. And then, not that I ever expected that to work, but he said to me, all of a sudden he said, yeah, or the next day my neighbor walks over with 2-gallon bags of, he said yes, and then the next day my neighbor came over with 2-gallon bags of his painter's pants. And so I had all this material. And so, those of you that are quilters out there, when you get material, you're textile workers, you get material, you start working with it, right? And so that was when I knew that I had to make this piece. That's how long it took to figure it out. It was getting it all white. But I had never hung it on a dark wall, and the museum did that. And I don't think this piece has ever looked better than it does in the museum right now. These holes are relatively close to the holes that are actually in the Star-Spangled Banner, and kind of the pattern. So if you see an image of it, you'll recognize that. At the same time, I wanted to kind of continue this idea of medium as message. And I knew that I had a really, the opportunity at the museum was huge. And so I wanted to make some really big works. So I started working on a large version of the pie piece. I used all the clamps in the shop, pretty much all the clamps in the shop, and started carving on it. And this piece is in the exhibition right now. I had a student worker through the fellowship that was funded, which was completely awesome. And thank you, Lila, for all of your hours, in Berkeley for standing. And it was really fun to kind of fabricate this pie tin and everything. And it's so funny. I'll show you the piece. And so this is the final piece that's in the exhibition right now. And it's so funny. I've had so many people ask, like, where did you find the pie tin? It's like, well, it's 5 feet. It's 5 feet across. That's not too many places you can just order a 5-foot pie tin. Amazon doesn't carry those, I wish maybe like a 24-pack at Costco, but so I had to fabricate that, which was really fun. And I kind of it once it was done, I was looking at it, and it's quite large, and it's made in pieces. It's stuffed with neckties, just like the other, to kind of, what's more American than a necktie pie, and so I decided that it needed a base that wasn't just a pedestal. And so I've been using these sort of like off-sized picnic tables as bases for my pieces, and kind of figuring out a way to integrate the, get the white cube out of there, or the white pedestal out of there, and figure out how to kind of integrate the pedestal into the concept. And so, I was drawn to this idea of using a picnic table. And so I got to fabricate these giant picnic tables out of cedar. It's interesting, actually. In this image on the left, its scale is a very curious thing, right? Because we're so used to seeing the flag, and they're on lapels and also really large. It's hard to tell how big that is. But the pie is 5 feet across, and the flag is like 6 feet almost long. And so you can kind of get a sense for that idea of pushing in the scale, and kind of considering what that does to the viewer, and how the viewer can sort of interact with the work with they're really close to it. And I've been to the museum a couple of times now for events, and it's been fun to watch people, really sort of investigate the work and get in there. And I always thought that if something was really small, people would be more attuned to kind of get intimate with it and get their face in there. But honestly, I feel like maybe there's something, because it's so big, that people are letting their guard down, or just deciding that it's okay to look. But it was fun watching people really kind of investigate this thing, and trying to figure out how I made it, which isn't all that, it's just with a grinder. That's the jam. So anyways, this piece is called Enough to Go Around. And it's this idea of there really is enough to go around for everybody. It's just a distribution issue that we have, and that if we all shared, we all would be able to have what we needed, as Americans and in our society, but also worldwide. And I think that as we get more and more globally connected, this idea of sharing and sort of making sure that we distribute things is going to become more important. At the same time, I talked about how I liked the conceptual implications that using uniforms of workers, or wedding dresses or whatever, could have on the work, and kind of thinking about textiles in that way. The other way that I thought about textiles was sort of thinking about the conceptual weight of patterning, and how patterning can really kind of, can be iconic. It can direct a conversation, and specifically plaid patterning is what I got into. And so I started making these pieces here. This is a chalk snapline tool. And I was looking at construction tools. How can I make plaid patterns with construction tools? And so it's a chalk snapline on plywood. Those of you that don't know, this is what a snapline looks like. And it's used in construction, where a worker would stretch out a line, a piece of string that comes out of here. This is filled with chalk. When the line gets under tension and you pull up and snap, it's going to leave a straight line, right? And so that's how I was making these things. I was using colors directly off the shelf from Home Depot. I didn't want to alter them in any way. I like that idea of using the just what's available in the hardware store aisle. And these are 4 feet by 4 feet. So you're looking at tens of thousands of snaps. And if I'm going to be making work that's about work, it should probably take work, right? And so my art and my practice is very, it's very tedious. Like each one of these was about a 40-hour work week with an assistant to create. And, it just that repetition of line. But the end result is that when you do, say, for example, let's focus in on this vertical blue section here. So if you take this vertical blue section and this horizontal blue section, where they intersect, you get a darker value. And that's how plaid works, right? If you have a stripe of red and a horizontal stripe, vertical stripe of red and a horizontal stripe of red, it's a lighter value until it intersects with the other colors, and then they get affected. And it's true with the orange as well, and all the other colors. But I think it was really fun to figure out how to make plaid out of these materials. And then I started thinking about, what does plaid and high fashion have, in common? And in a lot of ways, high fashion has sort of appropriated these tartans from long ago, right? And so I made this Ralph Lauren inspired one, and then I stumbled upon Burberry, and Burberry is a high fashion luxury plaid, and by creating it through these working class materials, I'm addressing the conflicting symbolism that plaid patterning has, and also its relationship to labor, and class and consumerism and all those things. Burberry also came out with a mask line, which we may need more of, hopefully, knock on wood. And so kind of created that Burberry pattern here, out of the chalk line. And I started thinking about other materials. And this is actually the first time I showed at the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, was this piece in the Art of Labor show. I think the Surface Design Association sponsored that. And this is about 8,000 screws that come together and form that iconic Burberry pattern. And as I was starting to make these things, I was thinking about, rhythm and repetition and labor and those types of things. But also, I went into Home Depot, and I just was walking down the aisle, and I had this crazy moment, a total aha moment, where I realized, and I laughed out loud. People were looking at me, but the standard colors of screws that they had available were Burberry colors, which I think is just hilarious. I mean, I get how what are the odds, right? So then, each one of these becomes a pixel. And then where the black vertical and the black horizontal intersect, you see that sort of darkened square pattern. And sort of figuring out Burberry, the thread count of Burberry by screws, was quite fun. And that's something that I really enjoy my practice, is sort of problem solving, figuring out how to do that. I had to make graph paper because screw heads are actually 5/16, not 1/4 inch, which was, a good thing to learn at the beginning. Got quite good at doing it. Sometimes people ask how I make these things, and they're created just with a hand drill. I after making a couple, my shoulder was pretty wrecked, and so I bought a lighter drill, which was a good move. But I just sit there and bzz, 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 each one. This one here has the pocket shape here. Oftentimes luxury plaids put the pocket on a bias, which I don't know if you could see that, but mine does not on the bias. My pocket is in line, because I'm not that fancy. But a lot of times they'll do that. And so this one is kind of a reference to that idea as well. And so in sort of thinking about plaid and how plaid can be translated into different materials, Nancy mentioned the Pocket Park. There was a call for entries through the Downtown Association, San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, Local Color, San Jose, and Veggielution. And it was a call for entries that had to do with creating a mural, which I've never made a mural, so that was really interesting. That was a culturally inspired and textile inspired mural. And so I naturally was just stuck on gingham everything. And I thought of a gingham plaid, and with a Midwestern culture. And so I'm happy to say that that's up in the park and available for viewing. That's my daughter in front of it, in the back of my wife and son. We had a really fun time checking that out. So, gingham has just been really on my mind lately. And so getting back to the exhibition at the museum, these are gingham chalk line drawings. And so I took that same idea that I was doing with the chalk line, the snap line, but just really kind of focusing on gingham and sort of what happens if you zoom in or zoom back from the gingham pattern, and created these compositions here. Apparently everybody had gingham fever. That's Amy there. I stopped by one day to the museum and she was wearing her gingham shirt, which is awesome. It's oh my God, you look like an art piece of mine. And so she helped me take that picture. It's great. And so these are on the left side of the exhibition. And then I started really kind of wanting to, get back into like cutting fabric. And this is actually an image of the laying out of the fabrics and kind of how I'm organizing them prior to making it. And this piece here that I'm building that's in the exhibition is a gingham plaid tablecloth with a flag on the top. And that's actually my son back there in Zoom school doing that from last spring. And I learned a lot making this. I dyed all these fabrics myself, and it was really interesting actually. As I was dyeing them and trying to figure out how to make this, I had graph paper out and trying to, I didn't know what I was doing at all. It was great. As I was dyeing them, I realized that some of them were coming out pink when I washed out the dye, and it was this funny moment where I looked at the labels and realized that I was using a cotton dye. So all the shirts that are 100% cotton came out red. And then all the ones that were a blend, let's say 60-40, came out kind of pink, like 60% of it dyed and 40% of it didn't dye. And that was like one of those discovery through process kind of moments of making that was really fun, making this work. But after I put it all together, this is the installation shot from the exhibition. And you can see it, this is about a 20-foot table. And so it's roughly 30 feet, a little bit less than 30 feet. And it's made out of carpenter or painter's pants and dyed collared shirts, and then carpenter's pants and blue collar and white collar suits up top. And so, again, it was like focusing in on making sure I captured the details of the cuff. That's a hammer loop there. Making sure that I paid attention to all those details and paid them reverence, but then also wanted to make sure I got this transition right so that it transitioned up into the piece, correctly, and those types of things. And then, just kind of really making sure that I got and kind of captured all that compositional information that can be on just an individual scale. So, the whole is a composition of the parts. And yeah, so that's kind of the centerpiece that's down the middle. And then there's one of the COVID flags and some other flags from the flag series there. And this is an installation shot that Daniel took, thank you, of the whole kind of show as a spread that's there now. And so on the wall behind me is the StarSpangled Banner piece, and then there's some more pieces on the side. And I don't know, I've been really happy. It was fun the other day at the block party that was kind of honoring the opening of the mural park. I got to go in there and sort of be like incognito and watch people interact with the work. And you don't have too many opportunities to do that as an artist, especially in the last couple of years with everything sort of being so isolated. And it was really a joy to see people experiencing the work and kind of feeling the work and seeing it in person. So again, thanks so much for the opportunity, Nancy, and everybody else, to put on the exhibition. And hopefully there are some questions that I can answer coming my way.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a fun exhibition, and it's actually been a lot of fun to see visitors come. So I'm going to kind of start with the flag series and quilts in general. And I don't know if you call your flags quilts or you call them flags. When did you start getting interested in making quilts or using this format for your work?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I learned that they're not quilts because they don't have batting in them. So I believe that they're just textile works. But I've never been one to worry so much about definitions. So that would be maybe they can hash that out in the Q&A. But they do have backs and they're tied. But regardless, so I had a colleague of mine approach me about being in an exhibition using like found material, and it was with a bunch of artists that were at Recology at the De Sausset Museum at Santa Clara, and he asked me, if I had anything or if I did any work like that, and I had all these suits that were donated to me and all these old pants of mine, and I just got the idea, and I called my friend, and she came over and showed me how to use my sewing machine because I had never done that, and then
You just happened to have a sewing machine?
I did. My mother-in-law gave me one, so I happened to have a sewing machine.
Go
so yeah,
mother.
like You know, the ideas, they happen, like I was saying, they happened like 2 years ago, and then time evolves, and then, you know, then there's the moment that it's supposed to be made, right? And so I hacked my way through it. I just I mean, it took forever because I had no idea what I was doing. And then when I got done with that, I took classes at Eddie's Quilting Bee in Sunnyvale because I realized I needed to bone up, and if I was actually going to do this, needed to do it, learn how to do it the right way.
Well, you did learn how to do it the right way. Some people are just rebels. We loved your term, angry, sew your way through things.
I should
So
say my way. Yeah.
so you see your work as engaging the process of quilt making, but also departing significantly from traditional quilt making.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I don't know if it's departing significantly. It's just departing from that batting part. I mean, maybe I should put batting in there and then the conversation's over. I'm not
Well,
sure.
Studio Art Quilt Associates has come out with a new definition of a quilt, which is layered and stitched.
Mm,
And refers to the traditional medium. So I think you would still qualify.
there we go.
One of the question was, does anybody ever object to your interpreting the American flag in this way?
Not really. Not necessarily into my interpreting of the American flag in this way. I have, you know, I think that we're at a point in society where, you know, the American flag is really being looked at as a symbol, and I think it's, you know, it's recontextualizing that in the way that I'm doing it is no different. You know, there's this 1619, which is a Nicole Hannah Jones podcast. She has this really great line in the first one where she's talking about the American flag and then what that means to her family and how she hated it growing up and her dad really loved it, and you know, and she didn't like what it represented. And then eventually in the end, she kind of took it on as her own symbol in her own way, and decided that that symbol could then represent her and where she was from. And I think everybody has their own interpretation with it. It isn't my intention to do that or to rock the boat at all. I'm certainly doing it from a place of honoring. However, it's not lost on me that you know, that the American flag is a symbol that's being investigated in new ways at all times. But I'm using it hopefully as a symbol, as a unifying symbol.
Excellent. And you talked about your interest in working with used clothing in your works. You mentioned people don't, the first batch of inspiration was given to you. Do they just come your way? What's your usual process for collecting garments? Does it change depending on what you're trying to find or what you're trying to do? Or do you work with what you have?
That's great. I in the beginning I was working with what I had, and then I realized that I wanted to, you know, I wanted to seek after certain things. So like I told my cousin, like, hey, you know, you give me 2 pairs of your beat up work jeans and I'll give you a new one. Right. And so I kind of started collecting stuff that way. The scrubs actually happened like a couple of years before COVID. We didn't make it to the hospital on time, and so I delivered my baby in the minivan with my mother-in-law and my mom. That was great. Everybody's just happy and healthy, and it worked out. But when we got there, I was talking to one of the doctors, and like as I was like, "Oh, this doctor's pretty cool." And as she was leaving, I was like, "Excuse me, I'm an artist. Can I have your old scrubs?" You know, and I did, you know, and you know, a few months later, I got them from her, and so that's what the patch, the Dr. Dilworth patch is in the one in the museum. But you know, it always kind of comes from different places. Now that people know that I'm making this type of work, it's much easier to get, like the neckties. You make work out of neckties, people start giving you neckties, and it's awesome. Keep them coming if anybody has any. But you
Should
know,
we
it's
put your address in the chat? Be careful
uh,
what you wish for.
maybe just like an email and we can go from there. I think maybe that'd be, yeah. Thank you. But then a lot of trips to Goodwill, you know, I take the stripes and I walk down the aisle at Goodwill and I try to find the right color of collared shirt, you know, because there's not all blue collared shirts are the same color, right? And so try to find which white is the right white. And so it's a lot of kind of searching at this point.
So much of your work is about Americana, American symbols, uh, construction workers, picnics, apple pies. I love the picnic tables, gingham, plaid. But one of the comments in the chat was that Wisconsin happens to have the most pre-Columbian mounds of any US state. Were the Indigenous Wisconsin people's influence, did they influence your work at all?
I'm not yet, but that's interesting. I think I've been more pulling from like my personal history and sort of that vantage point that I began at, but that's a really curious idea. I mean, the Menominee Reservation in Wisconsin is the only part of Wisconsin that hasn't been clear cut, and it is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. I think the state's been cut 3 times now, but
There you go.
yeah, it's that's a really curious idea. Thank you for that comment.
Well, it'll be in the chat. You can find out who said
Yeah,
it. So, and I loved your comment that your work is about work, and that if you are talking about work and addressing labor, that you can't have something that's made in an afternoon. I love that concept because so much of textile art is labor intensive, whether it's weaving, quilt making, whether it's handwork, or even, fine machine work. Do you hope that your work prompts discussion about the labor force and the discrepancies in the gig economy versus our CEOs? And do you hope that the viewer also contemplates the art of labor, as our exhibition was?
yeah. I mean, certainly. I think that's conceptually maybe for a lot of it, maybe the point that I'm trying to get at. I think you kind of hit it on the head there. It's interesting as you were saying that about all those different traditions and how labor is involved with them. I like that parallel in my practice, but I also think that there's, in all of the things you mentioned, there's a striving for making hidden work, right, or hidden labor, right? Like when the finished product is on the wall, there's a lot of that you're not supposed to see, right? And there's a lot of that like, when the object is finished, when the quilt is finished, when the tapestry is finished, it's supposed to be about this kind of hidden labor. And maybe there's a really good parallel there between the hidden labor forces that run our economy, the people that are at night vacuuming the floors, and the people who are delivering water, and the people who are doing all those things. And maybe there's a really interesting parallel between that and then sort of like, the architect that gets to put their name on the building, right? Or somebody who's like you said, the gig economy. And that's really curious. I mean, I would love for the conversation to be opened up, and for us to really consider labor and how we value labor, and how we pay people for what they do, and the skill sets that are there, right? It's like maybe in some ways, I mean, if you're a custodian, like your job is about hidden work as well, right? When they get there in the morning, they're not supposed to know you were there, and it's supposed to be done. So that's really curious.
Which kind of leads me into the next question, which is also a comment, because I think, especially in the case of often traditional historic quilt making, that women's work, and it wasn't particularly valued until the quilt became a commodity and was collected and had, was in the art market in the early 70s as it started. And now it does, I think, have more psychological and monetary value to our society. And that whole concept of the value of women's work. Somebody made the comment that you did use primarily women's clothing in your work, although we find out not. You had the women doctor scrubs and, of course, the wedding dress. But I mean, do you see your flag series as also kind of, I don't want to say gendered, but are they symbols of working class men? Are they symbols of women? How you address that dichotomy of gender in the work, and is that actually part of it?
Yeah, I guess obviously it's something I've thought about. I think I address my work from a very personal point of view, and then hope it has a universal message. I like the way that work can do that for me. Like I like the blue collar and the white collar materials and these uniforms of these workers. I enjoy how they still feel very personal to me. Like a lot of the pants are my pants, so it would make sense that they would come off as being masculine because they're pants that I wear, I guess. It was also equally as fun to make the wedding dress piece, and I think what I'm realizing now is that I'm opening up to this notion, the scrubs and the wedding dress were really made in the last like year. And so I'm opening up to this new idea of kind of what other materials are out there. And, what can I, it's actually funny at the museum, they have a scavenger hunt right now. And one of the questions is like what other materials can Ryan Carrington make like art pieces out of? And it's like, oh, wow, I kind of want to find the answers to those. Like, that's pretty good. And so if they ended up being things that were taken more as traditionally feminine materials, I that would be fine with me. I don't, I'm not trying to be exclusive by being inclusive. I'm just more, making work from the standpoint that I'm at, and kind of thinking about it that way. But I suppose if I could bring up issues of gender, I mean, that would be great. We're very far from things being equal. It's like 70 cents to the dollar or something ridiculous still in this day and age. And so if I could help guide the conversation to bring more equality in that way, that would be fantastic.
I'm just some technical questions. I want to get back to talking about your sculpture. What kind of sewing machine do you use? Thank you to your mother-in-law. The seams seem really thick. Do you use a rotary cutter? How do you make the stars? They're so uniform. I'll stop at 3.
Okay, great. I use a rotary cutter. I use a Janome, and it's just like a tiny little thing, and that's the angry sewing. Just get through it. The 30-foot thing I made on that machine. I mean, it's quite the balance of like, it's actually like people who make big stuff know this, but it was pushing the fabric through the thing was this whole process. It took like an hour and a half to do one side. And then the last one was the bars. So I actually cut out stencils out of acrylic or like plexiglass, and put that over with the seam allowance and put that over the compositional parts that I want, so that I can pick like how high the seam is or where the button is, so I don't run into it later. It also gives me very straight edges to cut around, for keeping the bars straight. And then, I believe very much in the idea of handcrafted, and eyeball craftsmanship is something that I employ often. And I think that if you really got like a measuring stick out and really measured it, the bars wouldn't necessarily be all that perfectly straight over some of that area where you've got all this balled up material and everything. But eyeball craftsmanship just sort of levels it out for you.
Great. Question about the sculpture. How do you determine the scale? And you did refer a little bit to, you wanted to make a big apple pie. And the second question is, men's ties is pie filling.
That's the end of the question. Men's ties.
Yeah, why men's ties?
Well, I don't know if they're men's ties. I think ties maybe traditionally are men's ties, but those aren't necessarily all men's ties.
Okay. And then the question on how do you determine the scale?
I see. So I'll still address the other one, but the scale for this one, honestly, 5 feet fits in the back of my truck. And so I keep making. I mean, I made that hard hat, and that thing is like 400 pounds and super hard to move, and it's in sections, but it's still just a bear. And I learned that it's best if things fit in my truck, and then are as big as possible. I mean, my students will tell you, I'm always like, oh, that's a really great piece. It'd be better if it was 10 feet tall, or oh, that's really great. It'd be better if it was in a series of 30, which is like the way that I work, right? It's like bigger and more. And so I think that helped determine it. I also looked at the layout of the museum. I mean, the show got kicked down because of COVID. It got kicked down the calendar a little bit. And so I had time to actually kind of plan out and sort of made a little kind of drawing of like where things would fit and how they would fit in there. And so that helped determine it as well. As far as like the Coming Home piece, which is I don't know if I said the title, but Coming Home is the quilted gingham plaid piece. As far as that piece goes, I just wanted to make it really long. I wanted to make it like have that kind of impact with it. And then the tie filling, it was just sort of like, how do I get the white collar in there with the blue collar material of the plywood.
And I just have one last question. What's next for you? Any future plans or ideas you'd like to share?
Well, hopefully a lot, right? But I'm going to take a deep breath, finish up some projects around the house. I've been really interested in the gingham. I had a lot of fun with that. And so I think I'm going to make that gingham tablecloth, but as in wall hangings, is kind of the next sewing project that I have. And I've got got my stuff, I've got my dyed materials out, and I'm getting ready to embark on that journey and do that. And then I've got a couple of other bigger sculptural pieces. Might involve a kid's training wheel at 5 feet. We'll see.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This was a fabulous presentation. I always enjoy hearing you talk about your work or just art in general. Everybody I think loved hearing more, and can't wait for more audience to see your exhibition in person. So I hope everybody will be able to join us. Contradictions will be on view in our galleries from now until September 12th, 2021. Check our website for our hours. And we'll also put Ryan's website and social media info in the chat. So please make sure to follow him online. And I also want to thank once again our generous sponsors for supporting this event, making it free. And we'll be sharing this presentation on YouTube and Facebook afterwards. If you enjoyed the talk and you'd like to donate or become a member, please do. Please patronize our sponsors when you need supplies, and visit our website at sjquiltmuseum.org. And join us next Wednesday for our next presentation with the Modern Quilt Guild. And we look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye.